The Mecklenburg County election debates are a service of WTVI, Mecklenburg County, and the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg. The views and opinions expressed in these debates are those of the candidates and do not necessarily represent the views of WTVI, its management, Mecklenburg County, or the League of Women Voters.
Hello, I'm Jason Stujanki with WSOC TV here in Charlotte. In the next 30 minutes, we'll speak with several parties who represent those who support and those who are against the North Carolina Constitutional Amendment. When North Carolina voters go to the polls on May 8th, they will be voting not only for candidates to represent them, but also for or against an amendment to the North Carolina Constitution. Voters will vote for or against a constitutional amendment to provide that marriage between one man and one woman is the only domestic legal union that shall be valid or recognized in this state. All of these questions come from the League of Women Voters. Now, you will have 3 minutes to answer each of the questions. The representatives are speaking in favor of the amendment is Tammy Fitzgerald. Tammy Fitzgerald is the executive director of the North Carolina Values Coalition, the chairwoman of Vote for Marriage NC, and a licensed attorney. A resident of North Carolina for over 20 years, Fitzgerald is widely known for her strong defense of family values. Fitzgerald resides in Raleigh with her husband, Craig. They have 2 children, Paige and Grant. Now, Jordan Lawrence serves as senior counsel and senior vice president of the Office of Strategic Initiatives for the Alliance Defense Fund at its Washington, D.C. Regional Service Center. He has litigated religious liberty, free speech, and marriage cases across the nation since 1984. He is admitted to the bar in 3 states, the U.S. Supreme Court, and multiple federal courts. Now, speaking against the amendment is John Wester. John Wester is a Charlotte attorney who practices with Robinson, Bradshaw, and Hinson. He has volunteered to represent indigent and disabled citizens, in the courts and is now the chairman of a new Mecklenburg Bar Initiative to ensure that low-income citizens of Mecklenburg County have access to legal representation. John is married and the father of 2 sons and a daughter. He is a registered Republican. And Landis Wade. Landis Wade is a 28-year business and employment trial lawyer who practices law with McGuire Woods. He does pro bono work for the NC Legal Aid Society for domestic violence victims. He is unaffiliated as a voter. He has been married for 28 years and has 2 grown children. He blogs about this amendment at NC Amendment 1 Truth. Now we're going to go to the opening statements. Each side has 60 seconds. We'll begin with the for side.
Thank you, Jason. My name is Jordan Lawrence, and the reason to vote in favor of the marriage amendment is to prevent state courts from invalidating the state marriage laws based on the state constitution. This is not an idle concern. This has happened in 9 other states where the states have struck down their marriage laws that are just like those in North Carolina based on their state constitution. This has caused 30 states to pass amendments to prevent this and to keep this issue with the people. Thank you.
The against side?
Yes, John Wester and I are here today because we are concerned about the legal harms of Amendment 1 to families in North Carolina. We're here today because Amendment 1 is about much more than just marriage. It's about prohibiting civil unions short of marriage, and it's about placing all unmarried couples in a classification known as an illegal domestic union. We're here today because 11 family law professors at all 7 North Carolina law schools have said this amendment is vaguely worded and could lead to the loss of domestic violence protections, domestic partner benefits offered by municipalities, and could affect child custody and visitation rights and invalidate wills, trusts, and end-of-life power of attorneys.
I'm John Wester. Well, we North Carolinians have worked hard over many decades to emphasize North Carolina's strengths as a forward-thinking community that values creativity, intellectual prowess, and diversity. North Carolina has prospered from its ability to attract the best and the brightest. That's the foundation of our homegrown company's success.
I'll have to stop you there. We're going to try to stick as strictly to the time as we can. Don't make me the bad guy. We'll move right into the questions. Each side will have 3 minutes. Again, you can share those 3 minutes among yourselves, but not 3 minutes to each person. The first question is, why does North Carolina need or not need this amendment? We'll start with the against side.
We do not need this amendment because we have a law that is as plain as it can be and has been on our books nearly since the state was founded, that defines marriage as between only one man and one woman. In addition, if one would go outside the state and get married, going outside the state, get married, and coming back to North Carolina, this state won't recognize that marriage. It is entirely unnecessary to think of this law as subject to constitutional attack by the courts in this state, first because nobody has suggested that our state courts are going to overturn that long-standing law, and also because North Carolinians have honored that arrangement through all these years. The devilish irony, if you will, that arises if we pass this amendment is we could attract a lawsuit in the federal courts that would say on equal protection grounds that this measure is unconstitutional. So it is, as I say, a real irony that we could have a measure passed here by those who maintain we need this measure, and that would serve to create the greatest likelihood, I would call it something like a lightning rod, to draw federal lawsuits, to bring federal attack on the marriage law as this marriage between a man and a woman, and maintain that's a violation of equal protection.
And I'll just add briefly to that it's also not necessary to have this law put into our Constitution, because it's not appropriate to embed discrimination in the Constitution, nor is it appropriate ever to use the Constitution to impose the will of the majority on the minority. Constitutions were meant to protect the minorities. In this particular case, the poorly worded language of this particular amendment, which could have been different than it is, focuses on something more than marriage. The biggest lie about this whole debate here is that this is the marriage amendment. You will hear that. You will see signs that say vote for marriage. What you really need to be thinking about is whether you want to vote against illegal domestic unions, and we'll talk more about that term in a moment.
All right, same question to the for side.
Thank you. This amendment is necessary because of what's happened in other states, and it is really untrue that the amendment is unnecessary, as our opponents have stated. Even though our marriage laws are good laws, they are statutes, and they can be overturned by courts. In fact, we've had a threat in our very state filed last year in Greensboro in Guilford County. A lawsuit was filed challenging our marriage laws as being unconstitutional because they don't allow same-sex couples to get married. What this debate is about marriage. It's about protecting the definition of marriage that we've had in North Carolina since before we became a state, since before our country became a country. The definition that's been throughout all generations and all civilizations is that marriage is between one man and one woman. And so our opponents have chosen to make this debate about something other than marriage, but the truth is the amendment is two simple sentences intended to do one simple thing, and that is protect marriage between one man and one woman.
And the amendment is worded similarly to the ones in the other 30 states, and that all of these horror scenarios that have been put out to scare voters have simply not happened in any of the states. Nobody's lost their benefits. Anybody who's living together should not have the right to beat up somebody else in the house. And I just think it is shameful that people would make the accusation that something like this would take away criminal protections to people living together in a house. If there's two roommates that have no relationship, they can't beat up each other, and they haven't been able to beat up each other in the 30 states that have these amendments at all. And what I also think is whenever you hear somebody who opposed this amendment, ask them this: you think this current North Carolina marriage law is unconstitutional under the state constitution, don't you? And that there have been suits filed, and if the votes were on the state Supreme Court, you would welcome a decision striking down the marriage law just as it has in 9 other states and possibly 10 in Minnesota. And that's why Minnesota is going to be voting on a similar amendment this fall. If there's any benefit issues, even if they legalize same-sex marriage here in North Carolina, there are couples that could not get benefits. If there is a man taking care of his grandmother, he can't get domestic partner benefits anywhere in this state, in any of the jurisdictions that do them. If there is a woman who's taking care of her adult brother with Down syndrome, they can't marry in a state that has legalized, they can't marry even if they are of the same gender. They can't be domestic partners or civil unions. If there are benefit issues, they can be resolved on grounds entirely different than what's being said. And the cities that have that are right now denying benefits to unmarried family units and with no thought of changing that. And this amendment, if it passes, won't make a difference.
Actually, you're going to get a chance to continue here in a second. You start to hit on some specifics of the impact on the average citizen. Our next question goes directly to that. I'm going to give you a chance to go first on this one so you can pick up where you left off. How will the passage or non-passage of this amendment impact the average North Carolinian? You were heading in that direction. You have 3 minutes.
Well, I think what it's going to do is preserve the unique and important status of marriage. And I think that people have to face 2 important facts. One of them is that there's this amazing consensus among world cultures from the dawn of time, separated by oceans and cultures, that say marriage is the best way to raise children. And that's important. The social science shows that when children are raised in married households and by their own father and mother, they have better school results. They have less alcohol and drug abuse. And when we talk about domestic violence, children raised and women living with the husbands and the fathers of their children are less likely to be battered than those who are in cohabiting or any other type of live-in situation. We want to protect everybody from those kinds of battering situations, but the science facts are out there. People who are living in unmarried relationships are at danger and at risk greater than those in married couples of a husband and wife for domestic violence. That woman on the commercial, I would warn her, you not only need the protection of the laws, you need to realize that you're vulnerable by being in an unmarried relationship.
Well, I would add that if this amendment passes, nothing will change for the people in North Carolina because it doesn't change the law at all. It just changes the level of protection for marriage. So right now, civil unions and domestic partnerships are not recognized by state law in this state. That will not change if the amendment passes. Right now, same-sex marriage is not legal in North Carolina. That will not change if this amendment passes. But what will change is that an activist judge or a future legislature in North Carolina cannot redefine marriage for the rest of the citizens of this state without their active participation through a ballot vote. So this amendment is necessary to keep our definition of marriage from being changed against the will of the people. This has happened in California, where 7 million people in the state of California voted to protect marriage as the union of one man and one woman by placing that in their constitution. And then the federal courts and 2 judges on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals overruled the will of 7 million people in California. I call that judicial tyranny, and I don't want that to happen to the good people of North Carolina.
I heard them mention protective orders, same-sex benefits. Of course, there are a lot of very direct impacts that can be debated both ways. The against side, you have 3 minutes.
Let me start only because I want to pick up with Ms. Fitzgerald's last comment. She really does make the argument for our position, and it really plays on the irony thought. She and I might disagree about what judges ought to do, but let's just talk about what happens here. Here's the change. If North Carolina passes this measure, the chances go way up. I used the phrase lightning rod a minute ago, that federal court actions would attack this measure. That's what happened in California. That once you get to the federal side, this state measure that we've passed can be swept away. That what we've got right now, a clear law against having anything but a man and a woman being married, keeps things as they are and keeps it at the level that makes it most unlikely for that challenge. There can be a challenge every now and then. He says one is on the books now. There's no ruling at all, and there hasn't been one in 250 years.
I would like to take issue with the statements that no other courts have taken these amendments and interpreted them in a way to hurt people. In fact, if you vote against this, you're going to hurt no one. As John said, nothing's going to change. But if you vote yes for this, you're voting for more than marriage. You're voting, in particular, to deny, through municipalities, domestic partner benefits. It happened in Michigan. The Michigan Supreme Court, with an amendment that was actually not as broad as the North Carolina amendment, said that the municipalities could no longer offer those benefits because of the marriage amendment. And in Ohio, in that particular state, it took 3 years before the Supreme Court could straighten out the laws with respect to domestic violence. Along the way, many district court judges in that state struck down domestic violence protections for individuals. That could happen in North Carolina. There are over 250 district court judges in this state. The other side doesn't know how they're going to rule. The chances are that there's some of them are going to rule like the judges in Ohio, and it could take 3 years to clear this up. How many broken bones and black eyes along the way are going to be acceptable to the for side when they say this is about marriage and when it's not? It's about something called domestic legal unions, a term that has never been defined in the state of North Carolina in a case or a statute. And for that reason, what you're going to have is a classification of people, all unmarried couples, not just same-sex, but opposite-sex couples, who are going to be placed into this illegal domestic union classification. And it's going to affect them in such places as child custody and visitation. It's going to affect them in such places as end-of-right benefits. And the reason it is because there's a possibility, based upon all these family law professors who've said there is a possibility that courts could interpret that to determine that they're in an illegal domestic union and they don't deserve the protections any longer.
All you need to do is spend one afternoon or one morning in the courts in our state about domestic violence issues, and you learn foursquare what one bad ruling can do.
Let me move on to a topic that has been hotly debated here in Charlotte recently. I personally have covered stories on this. I've seen both sides of this issue. I'm going to start with the against side now, talking about the effect on the economy, on jobs, on business. Do you believe that the passage of the amendment will be helpful or hurtful to the state's companies? Why or why not? I may actually also throw in one other little footnote with that. You don't have to stay limited to companies that are already in the state, but maybe the state's ability to attract business.
Certainly.
Whichever you want to talk about is open.
Well, those are companion subjects, and I think they are fit together here. You can't marshal data about what has not happened, and we all will acknowledge that. But what you can do is pay attention to what kind of companies you have with you now. I've looked at the largest 10 employers in the Charlotte region, and I saw that in each one there's a specific and unmistakable expression that the employer will not allow discrimination in any manner against an employee on account of sexual orientation. A good many of these speak of the positive good that arises from diversity across the spectrum of our differences. Let's keep in mind, please let's do so as we evaluate this amendment, especially as we think of employers from other states and from other countries around the globe who are now evaluating North Carolina as a place to bring their facilities, build their next plant, or ask their employees to move. Our state needs jobs. We are in a fragile time, as everyone watching this program will agree, and we need to remove any roadblock we can to bringing in jobs rather than to build new ones. We are the last southern state without a marriage amendment, something that I suggest gives us a distinctive edge in the marketplace. One of our leading advantages in this very competitive multi-state approach to economic development is the well-established view that North Carolina is usually more progressive and visionary. Compared to other states, and especially here in the South, North Carolina generally takes the lead on issues benefiting all of its citizens. North Carolina sets the example, while in many cases our southern states have watched and eventually tried to copy. The research triangle didn't come out of people just sitting around and following, and there are many other examples of that.
And I would just add to that We are the last state that's going to address this question in the South, and we're going to be the answer to a trivia question one way or the other, and I hope the answer is right. I hope we end up on the right side of history with respect to this, and I think North Carolina's history is such that we can end up on the right side of history.
Passage of Amendment 1 would dilute the progressive image of our state's character and its direction, and it would risk eliminating one of our strongest and most appealing business advantages.
Now, I've interviewed some folks here locally, some self-proclaimed conservatives who agree with what you're saying, but you guys don't agree. Elaborate.
Well, I think this argument about the marriage amendment hurting business is designed to distract the public from the real issue at hand, which is protecting marriage between one man and one woman. This is absolutely false, and there is no proof whatsoever that this amendment would have any impact on business at all. In fact, there's no study that's ever been done, economic or otherwise, that would prove that passing a marriage amendment to protect marriage between one man and one woman has had any economic negative consequence for a state whatsoever. There is no proof. And the amendment is not going to have any impact on the ability of private employers to offer benefits to their employees as they are presently doing. It has no impact on private business employee benefits. But lastly, this amendment will not inhibit business development in our state. Every state around North Carolina has a marriage amendment. Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina. We are constantly competing with those states to attract new businesses and industry to this state. And lately, we've been losing a lot of the businesses to those states, and I suggest it's because of our corporate tax rate. If the marriage amendment hurt businesses so bad, you would think those states would be losing business and industry. But if you look at any study that's come out in the last 12 months in a business journal, you will see that the states that are ranked highest are states that also have marriage amendments. In fact, in almost any of the studies that we included in our paper on our website, every state has a marriage amendment. So it is just untrue to make the accusation that it's going to hurt business. There's no proof whatsoever, and I submit to you that marriage is what has made our state such a great place to live and work that it's ranked so highly.
Yeah, and corporations are free to right now offer those benefits. And if there are corporations in North Carolina now that are offering to unmarried domestic partners, I would guarantee that none of them allow a woman taking care of her brother with Down syndrome to be covered by them. A man taking care of his grandmother or his grandfather would not be covered. So if the issue to attract business is not workers' comp rate, corporate tax rates, the fact that you have a state income tax, but really whether unmarried family partners of an employee get benefits, there's a lot of people who are left out of the picture. It's not just two people, domestic unmarried partners, that are being cut out of these benefits. There's a lot of people that are cut out. If that attracts businesses, people to come work for businesses, the businesses are free to do that right now.
And we don't have much time left. I know we were going to allot 3 minutes per question, but you both hit on a very important topic. I'm going to give you guys each 1 minute, try to squeeze this in here, about the direct effect on families. Driving over here, I even saw a number of yard signs for folks against this amendment, saying that it hurts families, hurts children. Obviously, a very big difference of opinion. I'll start with you guys, 1 minute, and then 1 minute to the against.
Well, what the social science has shown is that communities thrive and children thrive in households consisting of their father and mother. Now, a lot of children are born in other situations, and the state has to deal with that reality. But if we, as the people of North Carolina, are concerned about cutting rates of domestic violence, cutting rates of youth drug and alcohol abuse, improving their schools, etc., then what they would do is encourage people to have children and between a mother and father and to raise them. President Obama said that the lack of the father is one of the worst consequences and contributors to criminal activity, drug and alcohol abuse, and poor school performances. So what we need to do here in North Carolina and elsewhere is to encourage people to have their children in a marriage of the father and the mother. And that's the thing that will help the best to help children here.
1 minute.
Yes, if this amendment were really about marriage, why didn't the legislature bring us the House bill, the original bill, which said the marriage between one man and one woman shall be the only marriage recognized in this state? Why did they have to give us an amendment that said it shall be the only domestic legal union? If they really wanted to keep the focus on marriage, they would have done just that. But by using this term, which has never been tested in the courts and which has created problems in other states, it's going to cause problems in areas of domestic violence, child custody and visitation issues, wills and trust, and end-of-life directives. And here's the reason why. Because you're putting people in a classification of an illegal domestic union, and if that's the state policy, if that becomes the public policy of the state of North Carolina, then you can't recognize some contracts because the law trumps contracts if they're against public policy. So really, you can vote no and send this back, and even if you're against same-sex relationships, you send it back, make them do it the right way, and bring us an amendment that really is about marriage and not one that has all these legal terms in it that's going to create harms for families in North Carolina.
You're going to get to pick up the ball and keep running with it. We're going to start with you for closing arguments, 60 seconds.
All right, thank you. My marriage of 28 years will not be threatened if Amendment 1 is voted down, nor will the marriage of any other North Carolinian. Legitimate threats to marriage include such things as divorce, infidelity, poverty, and lack of jobs for people trying to raise their families. But I do find it threatening that the state constitution is being used by the majority to trample on the rights of the minority. What if the roles are reversed someday? I also find it threatening that people are being told they are voting for one thing, marriage, when they're really voting for an untested legal term, domestic legal union, that could hurt real families across this state.
In our Constitution, in the very beginning of it, it states that we hold to be self-evident that all persons are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, enjoyment of the fruits of their labor, and the pursuit of happiness. I ask you today, is it the role of the state, our state, to decide whose right to pursue happiness it will assist and whose right it will impede? We ask you to come down on the right side of this question, the right side of history as we see it, and urge you to vote no.
Let me move across to you quickly, 60 seconds.
Thank you. We urge you to vote for the marriage amendment on May 8th if you want to protect marriage as the legal union of one man and one woman in our state. Marriage amendments have been passed in 30 other states across the country, and they have not resulted in all of the bizarre accusations that the opposition has thrown up, like domestic violence protections being interrupted, child custody being interrupted, end-of-life decisions. None of these have occurred in other states, and in fact, when the opposition talks about it, they're talked about as hypotheticals. I submit to you that this has not occurred in the 30 states where marriage amendments have been passed. The language of the North Carolina amendment is identical to the amendment passed in Idaho, and there have been no lawsuits filed on that amendment in 6 years. So this is not the state defining marriage. This is the opportunity for the people of our state to say to the government, you cannot redefine marriage for the rest of us.
Now, obviously, a lot of time pressure to pack all of those thoughts in. You both sides, thank you very much. Obviously, a very important topic here in North Carolina, and also a very good way to break down some of the key issues for voters. Again, I'd like to thank you, those who came to speak for the amendment, and also those who came to speak against the amendment. A great benefit, learned a lot here today. Don't forget to vote on Tuesday, May 8th. For more information on the candidates and issues, go to WTVI.org/debates. Thank you and goodbye.